Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast, episode number 6. I'm Steve,
I'm Marty with AP Meds.
and this is a weekly podcast we do all about aquaponic cannabis growing. We also touch on news, sometimes other cannabis-related stuff, sometimes culture. We also like to cover politics and legislation. So if you're trying to keep, current as to what's going on, we try to touch on that as well. Marty, what's going on with you this week?
Well, I just got a bunch of stuff in that I had ordered because I wanted to kind of redesign my garage so that I can have two larger separate areas for flowering and for vegging both. So I ordered a couple of big storage racks that I think they're 6 foot by 2 foot by, I don't know, maybe a little over 6 foot tall. And so I'm basically going to make a grow tent out of those. I have Panda plastic that I'm going to wrap around it, basically make a grow tent, but then I'll also have the storage shelves to be able to use for structure also. So I got all that stuff in this week and started to go through and kind of figure out where I'm going to put everything and get everything set up and figure out how many plants I'm going to run. So I think I'm going to have 10 plants inside this next run instead of 8. Kind of see how that goes with more plants in the same area, and kind of see how that goes. Other than that, not really too much going on. I guess another reason why I want to run more, or why I'm going to run more indoor plants, is that our county is kind of continuing to screw us, and we'll talk about that more later. But mostly, pretty much all outdoor grows in Jackson County are going to be shut down unless they're on specifically zoned property, and I'll talk about that more later. But I happen to be one of the people that is not specifically zoned. I'm on residential land, so now I can only grow indoors, basically, is what it comes down to, unless I want to pay their $1,500 extortion fees. So I'm going to run more indoors and kind of see how that goes, I guess. So that's been my week of kind of going through that stuff. There was a local meeting here to kind of investigate one of the commissioners on the council that's going to be up for re-election very soon. So he's going to be obviously fighting a number of growers that are not going to want to see him re-elected. He's trying to convince everybody to hop on board and re-elect him, and then he'll fix everything that he already fucked up, which somehow makes sense to somebody, a politician, I guess. But anyway, that's David Bridenthal here in Jackson County, so do not vote for him. Fuck that guy, as it were. That's been my week, pretty much. And work stuff, like other work stuff I do in my other life, just cloud IT stuff. So yeah, how about you?
We've had a crazy week. We signed a new contract with a new company, which in a couple of weeks we'll be able to talk a lot more about. We got involved with a new group down here that's next year hopefully going to be putting on a really big festival. I don't have a date yet. I think they're aiming for 420 next year. But we'll have more details on that stuff when the website's finished and everything else. So that'll be pretty dope, because it's a huge opportunity for Jamaica to make a whole bunch of money and get involved in a way to help out some people that, help out the locals down here as well at the same time. What else we've been doing? Finished up a big drawing of one of the properties here in Jamaica. See what else. Went out and visited some more of the farmers and stuff that we're going to be working with. Went to this really awesome Rasta meeting on Monday. They have this big gathering of all these international Rastas from all over the world, and had a talk about the implications of legalization in Jamaica for the Rasta community, and how it could affect how the Rasta community in Jamaica could raise funds and generate more, more help for a lot of the other people in other parts of the community and other parts of the world. There was people there from Guyana and Africa, South America, Asia, North America. I mean, you name it. There's people, Rastas from all over the world. It was really freaking cool. The lady that was at the UN last week was there, and you know, it was just a really powerful experience getting to go to one of their, you know, sacred places and meet a whole bunch of like the highest people in the whole community, and get to know them and talk to them about, you know, working together and all this other stuff. And it was a really awesome, powerful experience, and something I don't think I'll ever forget. It was really awesome. We're also working on a new project down here with spirulina, which will be pretty cool for fish feed, as well as some other things that I'll be able to talk about later. But that'll be pretty neat. So we'll be able to grow a lot of our own food down here because it grows so well. The licensing is getting really close to being finished down here in Jamaica. We've had another meeting about that, and it's getting pretty close. It's still going to be another few weeks, but it's moving. They're making progress now rather than just sitting around not doing anything, which is the problem. Nothing happens fast in Jamaica, unfortunately.
Well, especially in transition, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, that, and they have the transitional government and everything else at the moment. It's kind of a pain in the ass. And then I think that's about it for lately. I'm just trying to have some new projects that like I said, I can't talk about yet, but we'll be able to soon. And that's about it. Yeah, just some real big cannabis projects, and then some cannabis aquaponic related products that will be out later. That'll be pretty dope. That I can't say anything more than that about. Trying to think if there's anything else at the moment. I think that's everything at the moment. Just meeting with the Rastas, learning some cool stuff with them, seeing some of the stuff that they grow. That was, I don't know, that to me was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my whole life, to be honest with you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess it's another reason why I wanted to rebuild the garage too, is I have some new lights coming in. I guess also sort of things that I can't really talk about yet because the light isn't technically on the market yet. But it will be very soon. And what's cool about it is it's from a company that's based here in the United States. I mean, obviously they're still using, you know, Chinese diodes and things like that. Their products are still manufactured there, but they have a large footprint here in the corporate marketing LED space, and they're
Nice.
looking at sort of leveraging this other market they're getting ready to hit. So they sent me the report from another tester that they have running right now. I think he's based out of Michigan or something like that. Trying to think. Anyway, looks really good, really promising. Probably some of the best results I've ever seen under LEDs. So that'd be pretty exciting to get those in there instead of just the cheap eBay lights I have in there now. Pretty much anything is a step up from that. So these are supposed to be pretty fancy. So hopefully in about 2 weeks those should show up here, and we'll be able to start testing those out and letting you guys take a peek at them. So that'll be fun.
So did you want to talk a little bit about your local legislative stuff you got going on?
Yes and no, I guess. I mean, it's kind of the same thing that we had talked about before, and I talked about it with a lot of my other growers here locally, and it's just been extremely frustrating because at first it came out that Jackson County was going to interpret this statewide law in a, I guess, slightly different way, or it's more like just use it in a way to be able to regulate medical growers, which is something that they were specifically not supposed to be able to do. When they legalized it, that was part of Measure 91. It's, it says it in like six different paragraphs about how you can't regulate it. You can't change the medical program or regulate the medical program in addition to it as a part of recreational. So Jackson County uses the interpretation of the state that cannabis is a farm use product now. So now they're using that label. They're not labeling cannabis itself. They are regulating it for anything that's farm use and then making it entirely complaint driven. so that basically it enables your, in this case, I actually got a letter in the mail from one of my neighbors already, and it doesn't even say who it's from. It's signed concerned property owner, and which I find really funny.
Well, yeah, fucking cowards.
Yeah, basically the letter just says you can count on us filing a complaint, so you better follow all the rules because we're gonna file a complaint. And it's like, that's just my 12 plants in the back that I grow for myself. You know, like I can't even imagine.
Here's the other deal. Like, couldn't someone have just gotten a hold of the list or whatever and just mass mailed it? Like, that does seem like it might even be someone that's not even directly next. It sounds like a generic letter that was sent out to like the anti-weed community.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. My only thing with that is I know that my neighbor here next door was like, he was growing in a different spot. He wasn't growing here. He actually rents the place next door to me, so he doesn't own it. He wasn't really growing anything there. He was vegging some plants in the garage, but you know, nothing like flowering or anything like that. And everything was fine until harvest season this last year. He was like trimming in his garage, and he left his garage door open, and they were sitting out there playing music and trimming weed and smoking and all kinds of stuff. And so the neighbors across the street, you know, it's just a neighborhood here, so you know, obviously they can just look over and see it. So then he got complaint filed with his landlord about it, so he ended up having to get kicked out. So I'm pretty sure he just drew more attention to the fact that we were growing over here. And again, when you've got, you know, 12 big plants in the back, you know,
especially like right before harvest, it's a little
yeah, you know, so it's not like I'm trying to hide anything, but I do try to, you know, like I try to keep it low key. I don't want to necessarily like draw attention to it. I definitely don't leave my garage door open and have tubs of sitting around in my camp chairs while I drink and yell at people and play loud offensive music.
Right.
And not that I have a problem with offensive music, just that he's asking for trouble is sort of
just be considerate.
Like, so I think that's kind of where it comes in. I already know that the neighbors directly across were the ones that complained about him, that are directly across the street from me, and so I'm sure I'm probably getting lumped into his category to a certain extent. But I do find it hilarious that it's just signed concerned property owners, and nobody is, you know, like bothered to even just talk to me about it at all. And it says right on there just the stuff that I was talking about. Basically, if you are zoned residential or urban residential, rural residential, basically any type of residential, which is really about 90% of the valley here, even though
it's ridiculous. It's going to put a huge pull on the power grid. All of a sudden, the power bills are going to shoot up all over. And you know, if it's between a $1,500 thing and a $2,000 power bill, you're still better off paying the extortion.
Yeah, and that's really the issue that I have at this point. It's like, it's really just an extortion, and that's what I'm pretty confident that that's what they saw as an opportunity to say, like, you know, people will say exactly what you said. Well, it's better to just pay the $1,500 and still be able to grow outside, which is definitely true. But it definitely makes everything more expensive for every patient that's out there. It makes it that much harder for a grower. It's going to drive the cost up that much more. And, you know,
well, there's no reason you should have to pay money to grow your own damn medicine. Like, what other, do people have to pay $1,500 to go pick up their opioid pills at the thing? No, this is ridiculous.
Right. Or if you have
other liquor bottles.
Yeah. If you got a liquor cabinet, it's not like you have to license that, or they limit how much you can have in your wine collection,
right?
Or how many grapes you can grow, or make you track from seed to harvest how many grapes a single seed produces. It's just, it's ridiculous. And so it just makes it more difficult for both the people that want to grow for themselves and for small to medium-sized growers, which, you know, there's some like, you know, 3,000 of them registered right here in Jackson County. And so it's definitely an issue. And so even for myself, just growing for myself now outside, they've determined I'll still have to pay that. Originally, their first interpretation of it was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they ruled that if you were just growing for yourself, then none of the rules applied, none of the new rules applied to you, and you can basically have it your limit of plants, your 6 plants and your 4 recreational plants, as long as they are separated and labeled. These are my medicine plants and these are my recreational plants. As long as you have them labeled that way, then everything was supposed to be fine, and you were supposed to be able to have them outdoors. So now the latest interpretation, after the county has gotten a lawsuit filed against it, is now they're pushing back and saying, okay, well, none of that. Now we're going to interpret it so that you can still have your plants, but you still can't have them outdoors unless you pay the fee. So now, even if you're growing for yourself outside, you still get extorted for $1,500, even for just growing your own 6 plants.
See, that's ridiculous. It's absolutely asinine.
So that's what's happening in Jackson County, and then there's other counties that are basically the more conservative counties. When you look at Oregon, you pretty much have Portland is all of that whole area up there. There's a group of about, I don't know, maybe 15 counties or so that are all relatively progressive, and then the rest of the state is just back ass towards Republican bullshit most of the time. And so you end up with a not friendly environment to grow in, probably one of the most productive areas that you could possibly grow in. It just becomes now basically unusable to a large number of people to use it. Everybody from, just because you are zoned residential, doesn't even matter like what size property you have. I know I have people that are zoned rural residential that have like 200 acres, but they're still zoned the special determination they have is rural residential. And so it's extremely fucked up. So is what it comes down to, is that there's a whole lot of people that are currently growing for people that all their costs are going to get raised. Whether you grow for yourself like me, I'm looking at my costs going up by $1,500 if I want to grow outside. If I want to grow inside, which I already do a little bit, but I'll probably do more of now at this point, and just kind of feel that out. But that's the kind of decision that I'm left with, is either I pay more money to grow indoors or I pay more money to grow outdoors and have it not really go into anything. And it's kind of a fucked up decision to have to make in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And this is just so, if anyone hasn't gotten legalized yet, this is what they do after. They let everything legalize, and then they do these 1,000 little cuts and stupid city regulations and township regulations, and they just bleed you dry afterwards. And this is if you're drafting a new law, make sure it protects against this kind of bullshit, so that they can't get down to townships and fucking HOAs and other ridiculous stuff that just has no right to be involved in your own growing of medicine. Do they regulate vegetable gardens that way? No, get out of here. If you can have a medicinal herb garden, there's no reason why you can't have a handful of plants. This is asinine. There's no reason for this. And make sure that if you do get a law passed, you have some kind of provisional protections for patients that can override all this shit. Because if you don't, you end up completely screwed. Colorado Springs is another good example. They're trying to enforce like a 6-plant limit, even if you have a, cancer or sick child or a co-op. There's no reason for that. That's completely ridiculous. It's not even legal because it's protected on the state constitution. So even if they try to harass you, it's still questionable in court, and no one's been tried yet. So
right, and then they come up with all of these, again, all of these regulations that we quote unquote need to have, when a lot of thing being exercised on medical grows that have been in existence for like a decade and have had no issues with it. So that's what I don't understand, is like why we all of a sudden need a huge amount of regulation. And
well, so this is the
Trojan horse in the legislation.
This is the regulations they need to have. They need to have an approved list of mineral inputs, and if it's not on that list, or if a product contains, and then have an approved list of stuff that's explicitly banned. And then if it's not on, the list of approved mineral inputs, you can't use it, period. Okay, so you don't have to deal with anyone getting toxic cannabis. You need to regulate the pesticides and say if it's not on this approved, like Oregon and Colorado do, and say, if it's not on this approved list, you can't use it, because then they can test this stuff for combustion. A lot of the pesticides have been tested for oral intake, not for combusting and doing it after the fact. So that completely affects, whether or not something is carcinogenic. If you have to, if you're looking at how it burns and breathing in the combusted version of it. Okay, and the third thing is a basic cannabinoid and eventually a terpene testing on them, because it's no different than putting the proof on alcohol. I want to know that it's this strong if I'm going to buy it, or it has this type of makeup so that it helps me with my medical problem, or whatever it is. I need to know what's in it so that I know whether or not it's going to help me with what I'm trying to get out of that plant or out of that medicine or whatever it is I'm trying to do with it. And those are the regulations that need to happen, and that's not to make anyone's life difficult. That's just to keep everything clean, keep everyone healthy, and make things reasonable for the consumer, as well as if the farmer can prove he's held to that standard, he can get a little bit extra money. And then you add on things like certified naturally grown or organic, like Colorado does now, or they're working to do a structure for. I don't know if I don't think it's implemented yet, but they passed legislation to begin doing organic cannabis stuff. I don't think you can apply for the license yet, but I know that they're working on drafting the regulations. But then if you can grow to that standard, then you can make yourself even a little bit more money, because again, you're holding to a little bit higher standards. So then everyone makes a little bit more money in the long run, and the customer ends up with a better product. So putting a small amount of regulations, as long as they're right as far as production, is really sensible, and it protects both the consumer and the grower. The grower can say, I used everything on this list, and if he can prove it, and someone gets sick and tries to sue him and say, you used this pesticide, you gave me sick, you got me cancer, you got me whatever, he can go back to his records and prove it, because it got tested, and he can prove that it came up clean, and he can totally get the court case thrown out of court. Or that, you know what I mean? Like, if it also helps protect the grower, it helps protect dispensaries, because if you're testing and you can prove it, that really protects your business, and that's important as well. I mean, look at Colorado. At least once every couple of weeks you hear about someone that's trying to cut corners.
Right. I think that the important thing is that you test the product itself to be able to determine that it is what they say that it is, right? I mean, that's ultimately what you have to expect as a consumer. And really the only thing that I feel like that you can successfully regulate without having costs become so outrageous. Like, just now they're going to have to start going through and start regulating a lot of the stuff that they put in, like plant counts, for instance, is one of the things that are now going to be checked on. Basically, if you are growing for anybody by yourself or registered at a place other than where you live, you're likely to get plant counted. That's what it comes down to. And they have the ability to come in and say, we want to count your plants at pretty much any time. And that came in this last set also, whereas before they had to give notice, and there were some certain circumstances that had to be in place before they could just come in and do a plant count. So, it's just those little things that they take away, like consistently. It's like, oh, well, yeah, now it's legal, but we're just going to take this. Now we're just going to do that. And then they start copying off of each other, right? So this county figured out a way to completely ban it, and this county figured out a way to do that. Then you have ads now. Like, I just saw an ad the other night, I think it was last night, where it's basically two doctors from Klamath Falls, which is just east of here, and they banned pretty much all grows, all dispensaries, like pretty much Klamath County pretty much shut down all that stuff on a county vote to not allow the businesses there. So basically, it's legal to possess it. You can have it there. You can smoke it there. And this is for medical too. It's all that stuff, but you can't grow it there. You can't grow your own there. It's pretty ridiculous.
See, why? So when can I vote on whether or not to ban opioids in my town? Because I've seen more people dead from those. So can I get a vote in my county to ban all opioid painkillers? Because they're used both in medical and for recreational, and they're a huge abuse problem. I wanna vote on that.
Right. And so I
It's
guess
ridiculous.
obviously that's never going to happen. And one of the things is that I just don't think it has anything to do with that. Like the ad itself was these two doctors on there talking about the cost of marijuana and about how they've seen such a huge increase in the amount of hospital visits for, I can't even remember what some stupid bullshit
People
about
eating too many edibles. That's all.
breathing in anything into your lungs is never good for you and all that, like, just like pointless bullshit. Um, and it gets on the local news, like they basically just buy up advertising and they run ad campaigns and they get interviews on local TV, and then before you know it, everybody fucking believes this shit. And so
Yep.
now you have Klamath Falls, which is basically, like I said, banned all of that stuff, all growing, all that kind of stuff, and other conservative counties start looking to do the same thing. And so it's definitely an issue when you're doing legislation, and we knew that here in Oregon because we saw them try to do that to you guys in Colorado. We knew that going into it, and that's why Measure 91 literally has it written like 6 different ways in order to try and make sure you can do that. And so I think that it's important to say, yeah, make sure it's in your legalization, make sure that it's there, but also make sure that you have
whatever the constitutional whatever the constitutionally protected plant count limit is what you want to, and you can't change it in a township. You can't say that you can't grow it outdoors. You got to make sure you have these protections because you're going to find, the people that are still trying to fight the drug war that still got their head up their ass, trying to find little ways to nick and knack at you.
Right. Or even like in this case where they defined it as farm use, you have to be careful about how you define the product itself so that when you do define it as something, it is not something that can be regulated on a larger scale. So that if you say that it's a farm use product, now they can regulate everything that's farm use and have cannabis included in that. And so again, they use it as the strategy in that if I plant 500 strawberry plants in my backyard, nobody's going to complain about that. But if I plant 12 cannabis plants in my backyard, my asshole neighbor gets to complain about it and make me pay $1,500 because he doesn't like the smell of it. So that's the sort of enabling style that they will end up getting to, regardless of how you draft the legislation. If you don't have people in place that will uphold it, if you don't go vote for who's on your local council, if you don't vote and you put people in place on your statewide legislation, if on every level you don't have people that are going to support the legislation you put in place, they'll just simply pervert it to whatever they want it to be at the time. There's nothing more important than who's in place at the level of your local county, your statewide legislation, all that stuff. That's the most important thing. Those are the people that have the power. Like, it's definitely good. I feel like Measure 91 was written well. It's got good stuff in it to be able that other states should build off of, the same way that we built off of legislation that came before us. And now we have other stuff to learn from. Washington's the same way. They're kind of a cluster, not kind of, they're a lot of a clusterfuck right now in terms of legislation as well, in which they're dealing with the same kind of stuff, where they had definitions and regulations that were put into place on medical after recreational came into play. And so, learn from those mistakes and support people that support cannabis. Don't sit at home and say that your vote doesn't count. If you want to do that for the presidential election, that's fine. But go ahead. I don't think that you should. But if you're going to set out one or the other, definitely vote local and understand who the people are and who's going to do that, because those are the people that are actively screwing me right now.
Yeah, your little local councilman and stuff that you normally don't normally no one really gives too much mind to unless you're trying to get on a school board or move up a political ladder. Half the time, they're the ones that are come back and bite you in the butt, and they're the ones that have enough pissed off little old ladies, and they're the only ones that vote that'll agree with them, or this, that, or the other, people that just haven't been exposed to all the benefits of cannabis. I don't mean to single out little old ladies. But you know what I mean. The little, you know, the prohibitionist warriors is kind of what I see. You know, I kind of think of the same as the people that railed against alcohol and, you know, all the ladies smashing the barrels and stuff. It's kind of the same thing, you know.
All the Puritans.
The Puritans, yeah, that's it. So, and you got to make sure that, you know, you're researching these people and making sure you're at least replacing them, especially if you're at least going to vote on a state ballot. You know, I totally can understand why people wouldn't want to vote for Hillary or Trump. I'm not going to vote for either of them, regardless of who goes. But because they both are sellouts to Wall Street, either way. But that's just my own personal opinion. But at the same time, you know, go at least decide who's going to control your own local area, because if you don't, you're going to end up like Marty.
Right, or anybody in Washington, or anybody in Klamath Falls. I mean, it's the, you know, it's well documented at this point that, you know, the legislation, even well-written legislation like Measure 91 can still be perverted after the fact by people that are pissed off by the fact that it passed in the first place. Yep. That's really 99% of what we're dealing with right now, is that I would say maybe two people on the Jackson County board would be considered pro-cannabis, and probably even closer to neutral cannabis. You know what I mean? Like, just not against it.
It's not negative towards it.
Right. I would say there's probably one that's definitely proactive, because she owns a couple of dispensaries. So obviously she would be considered, you know, people have their own conspiracy theories about her not supporting some legislation to keep competitors out. But obviously I would rather deal with somebody that's pro-cannabis business on some level than a lot of the people that are essentially just trying to keep it out altogether.
Yeah.
So, but it matters. Your local representation matters greatly, even if you can get your state to vote for it. If you're not in a liberal part of the state, like I am here in Southern Oregon, we're definitely not considered liberal in our, you know, anytime they show the voting maps or any of that stuff, or these counties down here throughout all Southern Oregon pretty much always go Republican or conservative, however you want to call it. But the just drastic differences between the north part of the state around Portland and in that area. As you get down here, it's definitely more rural and just more Republican.
Alrighty. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about as far as that goes on that?
Not really. I'll probably have more. Probably have more to talk about in the near future as the lawsuit moves on. And I guess I can give a quick shout out to the Right to Grow people, Right to Grow Southern Oregon Facebook group that has organized and drafted the lawsuit. Sandy and Scotty Diesel and Steve Hunt. There's a local radio show out of Ashland. If you guys want to tune into that, I'll try to post the information. I can't remember what the radio station is right now, but they broadcast it online. So I'll try to put a link in the description for that. And they've done a great job in just organizing and getting that together and getting representation and a lawyer to dress up the stuff, and have just they've shown up at a number of different events. They met with Tommy Chong when he was at the 420 family reunion here, just a little bit north. So that was kind of a neat thing. And they had I think one in Eugene too. I think they had a stop there also. So that was kind of cool to be able to see them meet up there and kind of sort of get some publicity around there. They had a booth and handed out some stuff. So definitely check out the Right to Grow Southern Oregon people. And, you know, if you've got a little bit extra to donate and you're from the area, then, you know, by all means, give them support. And yeah, we'll continue the fight. And then other than that, I probably won't talk about it too much, except for the changes that I'm making to my system to accommodate for more plants. And I'm going to set up a little bit more environmental control. Like I said, I have build sort of like a grow tent with some shelves. So that's going to be kind of neat to go through and do that. I cleaned out some more space, increasing the number of plants that I'm going to run inside, and kind of shift gears a little bit towards that, at least for now.
Is the Right to Grow group the one that's pushing the lawsuit? Or
Yes,
filing the
Right to
lawsuit?
Grow is currently.
For those that don't know.
Yeah, they've filed the lawsuit. They so
Do you
they're
want to
pretty much
explain that for
funding
the
everything
people that are
through
just
donations
getting?
at this point.
Do you want to explain that just a little bit for the people that are just getting into this now, so they can, you know, be informed about what they're donating about?
Yeah, so Right to Grow Southern Oregon is basically just a group of people here in Southern Oregon to where we're sort of gathering together to try and lobby for rights as growers against all the stuff that I just got done ranting about. And so they're the people that are meeting with the representatives themselves, that are meeting with lawyers, hiring lawyers, paying for lawyers, and to go through the legislation and interpret it and answer people's questions. Like in the Facebook group, there's countless people that have gone in there and essentially gotten free legal advice from credible sources, which is an incredible, valuable thing to be able to do. And so I feel like it's a great service that they provide to be able to have somebody, because like me and myself, I've been to a couple of the meetings, but I haven't been able to get to all of them. So they rent buses and drive to different events throughout the state. So whenever they like to drop meetings at, like, at the 2 days away, for instance, they'll announce that they're going to have some sort of town hall meeting or discussion about it. It makes it difficult for people to get all the way to Salem or Eugene to be able to be involved in some of these discussions. So they organize trips, they rent buses, and they'll take a whole busload of people to be representation at these meetings that generally, in a lot of times, they're just trying to have a meeting so that they can put it on record and say that there was a meeting about it and you could have shown up and talked about it, but you didn't. Well, the fact of the matter is that, like me, myself, I can't just drop everything that I'm doing throughout the day and be able to drive up to Salem and represent my own beliefs there. And so having a group like that to where people can go through and be able to represent growers and not be able to let them sort of just have that loophole of saying, oh, well, we had a meeting and nobody showed up. Those people are showing up to every one of those meetings every time they want to slip one through. Every time we have representation there that says, hey, we're the growers here. We're the ones that are providing the medication to the patients. We're the ones that are trying to do and maintain the rights that we wanted to have maintained throughout Measure 91. Without them, there's not going to be some consistent presence at every one of the meetings. So, and everything you donate just goes directly to those things. Everything from legal fees, which I'm sure we never actually pay all of, and big shout out to that legal team that helps out. And I'm sure they have their own vested interest in it as well, but they don't have to do it. They could charge everybody individually the way every other lawyer would do for just about anything else. So obviously, morally, I feel like that's a great people to support. And then that's really pretty much the only stuff that your donations would be going to, as far as I know, is that's the stuff they do. They take on the legal fight, take care of all the costs associated with that, and then organizing trips or representation, protests, all that stuff, even the little stuff you don't think of, like renting a bus and filling it up with gas and people and driving out there.
It's really awesome. It's glad that we have groups like that, and it's a good example for people that want to help curb some of this stupid zoning crap and other ridiculous stuff. Just people, like, it's horrible that you have to resort to things like that, but it's great that you have a great group and a good example of how to do it properly and how to fight back against this kind of borderline illegal, underhanded control of people's rights.
Right. And it did require a significant amount of work. It's not like you can just say, oh, hey, well, this is unconstitutional, and that's going to be the end of your lawsuit. People have to understand that you have to go through and find precedents and find out specifically what regulations, what kind of power the county board is supposed to have, and figure out what they are in directly violation of. And so for here, I believe, if I remember correctly, in the lawsuit that's actually filed, was that they were directly interpreting the law that the state passed in contradiction to what its intent was. And the state lawmakers have already said that. And so that's definitely something that's in place. And so their response to the filing the lawsuit was saying that, if we didn't back off the lawsuit and then end up having to go to court, then they would be forced to go through and shut down all other small farms that are on residential. So they're essentially threatening to make us the bad guys and shutting down, local farms. We have everything from wineries to blueberry farms to blackberries to, tons of different little farms here spread out through the Rogue Valley. It's a huge valley. It's great for growing basically anything. And we have farmers markets, and a lot of that stuff is flourishing, and a lot of that stuff is flourishing on residential land in which they're directly selling and making profit from. And basically the legislation that they passed for cannabis makes all the stuff that they're doing illegal as well. All that stuff is considered farm use, and then growing it and selling it for any type of profit, even if it's just to recoup costs of growing it, whether it's blueberries or cannabis, is now considered that they would all have to pay for their $1,500. They could extort the rest of them. And so they're basically saying, if we push the issue, we're going to be the bad guys and forcing all of those other people to do it as well. So we should just drop our lawsuit and make it acceptable for them to just go ahead and fix the stuff that they already did wrong, in terms of that we're just supposed to trust them to come back and come out with a better set of regulations. And that's supposedly what their plan is to just go ahead and reelect us, and we'll come up with rules and ways to fix the shit that we already fucked up. So I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah, right. So you had recently finally gotten rid of your powdery mildew. Do you want to talk about ways that you could keep it gone, or do you want to talk a little bit more about that, and then we could talk about ways to keep it gone once it's gone?
Well, definitely, I would say that I'm still maintaining getting rid of it, I guess, is more like the best way to put it, because once it exists in your grow room, I feel like it's going to be there basically until you clean the entire thing. And that's one of the things that I've been wanting to do and redesigning anyway. Just kind of gives me two opportunities to do that. But in the way that I chose to control it with H2O2 or hydrogen peroxide, you're essentially changing the pH balance of the leaves, so that whatever PM lands, whatever spores land on your plant, don't have the ability to set in and grow. So the issue with doing it that way is that you're pretty much committed with doing that until you're done flowering, because otherwise, unless you're sure that you've gotten the source, you've gotten everything out of your room, you've been able to wipe everything down and clean everything up, as soon as you have any type of new growth on your plant, which in flowering, all your new growth is going to be in your buds, that anything that's not already been sprayed will then still be susceptible to PM. So that's what I was starting to deal with as I was going through and spraying it with other stuff. And what I found about the H2O2 spray is that I could spray it more often. I didn't have to worry about burning the leaves like I did with some of the other solutions that I had. And I didn't have to worry about cleaning them or rinsing them off like I had to do with milk, which was on my test plant that I used milk on. Was just a 1 to 10 mix with regular old milk, which is kind of an age-old deal. I would say it worked pretty well, but it left behind like a residue, I would say, that almost looked like PM. So it kind of became difficult to be able to tell the difference. So that's why I kind of backed off on that one. But I guess ultimately for me, what it comes down to is that if you're going to use a spray like H2O2, where you're neutralizing everything, you're killing off all the microbial life and changing the pH of the surface of the leaf so that it can't grow, be committed to doing that until you're done and you get to clean the room. Because I guess I feel like the only way to get rid of it 100%
Mm-hmm.
is to clean everything. And that might be just like my own paranoia, but that's what I'm going to do as soon as I'm done with this current run that I'm on right now, is I'm redesigning the whole room. And when I go through and do that, I'm going to wipe down everything, clean up everything, kind of clean every surface. And then when I'm done, I'm going to have an enclosed environment, which I think is probably one of the biggest things that you can do for keeping out, whether you're talking about PM or mites or any of that stuff. Having an enclosed environment is definitely the best way to go. So like right now, it's like I've said before, it's just in my garage with the rest of my storage, and kids come in and out of there all the time and get stuff and everything else. So going to go for a little bit more enclosed approach this time, and hopefully be able to keep it out of there a little bit better. But that's my experience with PM. I guess is I trim it off everywhere I see it. I spray every time the lights go off, and then about I would say about 2 hours before the lights come on, so it has enough time to evaporate off. So that's my experience with dealing with it. And I haven't had but maybe like 2 spots in the last couple of days. And that's really the only sort of like outbreak that I've had again. And so compared to before I started spraying at all, or when I was spraying with just worm tea was what I started out spraying with. And it worked okay, but it was like every day I would have like 2 or 3, 4 spots to be able to trim off. And it seemed like it was still growing. So that was the only thing that I found to really keep it down and out and not really have it pop up at all, was to continue spraying twice a night. And so I guess the question of how to get rid of it altogether is sort of different from how do you deal with it when it's there, because unless you can just basically harvest what's there, if you're willing to do that, or sort of be committed to dealing with it until your run is finished, that's pretty much what I found with it. So maybe you've had better luck. I don't know.
So what I found with the PM, well, first off, ever since I switched to dual root zone planting, I haven't really seen it a whole lot. But the other thing I've been doing in conjunction with that is I've been regularly dosing with Bacillus subtilis and silica into my res, and making sure that I'm maintaining both of those. And ever since I did that, I seriously haven't had an issue at all. Bacillus subtilis is a commonly used, it's a microbe found in all soil. It's commonly used for animal feed. It's in yogurt. It's in a whole bunch of different places. But it's a probiotic, and it happens to go after fungal spores. And if you directly dose it into the water, it's harmless to the fish, and it really helps with basically giving the plant an extra immune system. You can also spray it on the leaves to directly go after it. If you find a little patch of PM real early on, it's actually one of the better treatments. The other thing is with silica. Silica helps with increased yield. It helps with pest resistance. It helps with heat stress and pH stress. It helps with aluminum and iron stress. And also increases phosphorus availability, as well as how much the plant can resist frost. All of those different things. What I've used a bunch of different stuff. It depends on what I need to do with the water. If I need to raise the pH, I'll use potassium silicate or calcium silicate or calcium magnesium silicate. You can use all three as a pH up, as well as a silicate additive, or if you want to add silica and calcium or potassium or magnesium, you kind of take your pick based on what you need to adjust at the time. The best one that I've liked, or at least the one I use the most, is a zeolite based, because zeolite based is silicon dioxide, and that ends up providing a lot of silica without changing your pH at all, whereas all the others will raise your pH. But I definitely would recommend, if you're using like a potassium carbonate, or potassium bicarbonate, definitely consider using a potassium silicate instead, or alternating every other, or you know, if you want to stick to your normal regimen using a zeolite-based product. The two that I like the best are Growers Magic and or Keto Silica by Keto Life. But there's, you know, other silica ones. It just happens to be the one that was the easiest available, and so when I use, and you know, we'd worked with them a little bit, and I really, really liked it. I still use it back home. We're gonna try and see if we can get some of it down here. But it's the one I like the best just because it doesn't alter the pH. I can add it anytime I want. I don't really have to worry about it. Whereas with all the others, I need to wait till my pH goes down a little bit, and I need to adjust, which is kind of annoying. But a lot of your products out there, most of the ones that add silica are potassium silicate based, which will, you know, will move your pH some. A lot of people aren't aware of that. And then you're going to have to go and add pH down, which, you know, then you're adding a pH up, then a pH down. It just causes problems when you start to go back and forth. But silica plays a huge, huge role. And I'll be honest with you, having seen a whole bunch of different stuff in the last 3 years working with cannabis, it's got to be the #1 thing that, for whatever reason, cannabis people just completely ignore, or they just haven't read up or learned about. But it really, really, really helps. You know, it's really common for people to have no silica dosing or very little silica dosing, and I don't quite understand why. The cannabis community specifically seems to overlook that nutrient when the rest, you know, the rest of the agriculture industry has a real good understanding of how the importance of it. And you'll hear like really ridiculous myths like, oh, you're just adding glass to your bud, you're adding fake weight to your bud. No, you're adding structure so that you can add, you know, get more plants. You're adding a base, so you have more plant structure to build on. It helps those cell walls get stronger and make that plant able to get larger because it can support itself. You know, it's no different than you having like an extremely nitrogen toxic plant that's super, you know, super stretched, and it's growing too quickly and it's all floppy. It's you get very similar results if you run, you know, no silica. But you see, it's real common for people to run 10, 15 parts per million or lower silica, and then, you know, have PM issues and things like that. If you're running your silica levels, you know, 50, 60 parts per million or higher, you're not going to run into these issues. And some strains, you can even push it as high as, I know some people that are running as high as 160 parts per million on their silica and having no problem with it. Now, you need to adjust it for each strain. Some strains aren't going to tolerate that. Some strains will get a little weird on you. But, you know, certain strains will really, really love it, especially some of your indicas and stuff like that. They'll just suck it up and they give you, you know, even thicker, fattier buds, and it'll make them more crystallier and add some more trichomes to them as well. Increase your production, especially if you're doing, you know, hashes and other things. You know, it's going to help with your flavor and sales appeal. So it's just, in my opinion, silica is as important for you know, increasing weight and all that as CO2 almost. Maybe not quite there, but almost. Is, you know, it'll make a noticeable difference. And not only that, it helps with the pest disease resistance so much that why would you not use it? It's not per run to use because the dosages you need aren't that high. You know, it's,
Right.
especially if you're using silica dioxide, it's a little bit more expensive, but the dosaging is small. So, you know, a little bit goes a long way. And
Yeah,
it's
you
one of the
mentioned
most
that.
overlooked, one of the most overlooked nutrients. And it's one that when I teach cannabis classes, I lump that in with my macronutrients. I mean, it's, to me, it's that important.
Right, I definitely think so too, and I have read a lot about it actually, and like you said, the cannabis community doesn't have a lot of information on it, but there's definitely a lot of research on it in other fruiting plants. So definitely take a look at that stuff and you know, do some of the research like he was talking about, but don't look specifically for cannabis stuff because there's not that much information about it. Not that there's information that it isn't needed or there isn't information on, but I did find some information on the IC Mag where there was a pretty good discussion about it. But for the most part, I didn't really find any like significant mainstream studies or anything about it because we talked about it before too. And I definitely think that hits a good point too, which is that having healthy plants to start with is definitely, and keeping PM out is definitely more effective than dealing with it once you already have it. You know, there's sort of like two different ways of doing it. And I also wanted to check too, because I was pretty sure that we had this conversation before about, you'd mentioned that Bacillus stabilis before, And when I picked up these NPK raw nutrients that we talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
I was looking on the back, and you can see right there, that was in the mix that I did try to start with, but that was I had originally tried these before I had found that dead fish and the big spot of PM down underneath, and so it may have not been a fair shot, I guess, at because I wasn't really treating the source. If by the time I had found that and got it all cleaned up and stuff, I'd already pretty much had decided that the H2O2 was what I was going to stick with, and next time I'll probably switch that around and I'll probably have labs that I'll also mix in some of this stuff in with as well, because I didn't have I'd used all my labs in my worm bin, so I didn't have any made up to be able to do, and it takes about a solid 2 weeks or so to be able to get a good mix, labs mix going. So that'll probably be my plan for next time. And I think I mentioned that in one of our previous videos also, is that's a great thing to keep on hand. You can add molasses to your labs and keep it in the fridge for like 6 months, and just have some there so that if you do have an issue like this, you're not like me and, basically stuck having to fight PM for 2 weeks before you can spray it with labs. You'd be able to treat it right away and be able to deal with it faster than I did. So that's something that with this next batch that I'm making now, I'm going to definitely keep some in the fridge and have it on hand.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do is change the pH of the surface of the leaf. You can use potassium carbonate or potassium bicarbonate or potassium silicate, calcium carbonate, any high pH mineral will work, and mix the water up to a pH of 9. And you can spray your plants with it. If you have flower structures, it can burn them a little bit, but as long as you're using a good mister, you can spray that right on the leaf. It'll change the surface pH of that, and then a day or two later you can rinse it off, and it'll do a dent in getting rid of that PM, because PM cannot stand the temperature or a big pH swing. We used to, if we had found PM in the showroom, we used to alternate between a high pH spray and then Kapow, which is lemongrass oil, and castor oil, which is real acidic. And basically you're swinging the pH surface of the surface pH of that leaf quite a bit, and it makes it pretty much impossible for those mold spores to do it. And both those products are fish safe, unless you go dumping a whole bottle into the tank, in which case you're going to pH shock the fish either way.
Right. If you do, I found that you could that up around 8.5 or so can actually start burning some of the leaves if you don't rinse it off. So definitely, if you go up to around 9 on your pH in whatever spray you're using, then definitely rinse them off after about a day or so. And again, if you're just using that as your main tool in fighting PM, understand that any new growth that you have is not going to have that surface change of pH. It's going to have, any new growth is going to have basically be susceptible to PM growth. So you're going to have to continue spraying at least once a night would be what I would recommend right after the lights turn off, when the humidity starts to rise.
Yep. And that's when you're spraying to get rid of a disease or a pest, you want to spray it when the lights go off, because the stomata on the leaf are going to close, or not completely close, but they'll be at their smallest at the end of the day. And then if you're doing it for foliar feeding, like trying to get a nutrient into the leaf, you want to do it about an hour after the lights come on, because that's when the stomata are in the largest diameter, and they'll be able to intake the largest molecule size. So normally you'll hear that don't spray your plants when the lights are on because it'll burn them. If you're using a really good mister and it's a really fine mist, you want a big enough particle, droplets on there to get that magnifying effect on, ideally. But if you're trying to foliar feed, that's the best way to do it.
Right, for sure. And then, just keep an eye on if you do have PM already. So, the best way to not have PM is to not get it to start with, and to start with completely healthy plants and a healthy system and a closed environment that you ideally don't bring PM into. And that's why you see indoor growers a lot of times have completely dedicated and sealed off rooms, and they have filtered air intake and a lot of other stuff. Especially growers here in the Pacific Northwest, because PM is just something that you have to deal with. It's all over the place here. It's just, and I've heard from multiple people this year that it's the worst that they've seen it in quite a while. Just in general, I have multiple growers that have said that to me as well, and I've never had it be this bad before. Every other time that I've had PM in the last couple of years has been like, oh, there's a spot of PM. Let's improve the airflow. I'd adjust the fan a little bit, or put it in a different spot to make sure that I didn't have it. But for the most part, I would cut it out, make sure I didn't have any dead airspace, and spray some worm tea on, and I wouldn't even have it come back. So this year definitely seems more aggressive than it has been in the past. I don't know if that's just because I was lucky before, the environment was different, or it's like other people say, and there's just more out there in the environment. I'm sure that varies from year to year, just like allergy spores and anything else that's in the air.
Alrighty. So I guess we'll move on to the next thing. So we'll do our non-cannabis plant of the week. We started that last week. This week I want to talk about sugar snap peas. One, they're really tasty. They're super easy to grow in aquaponics, and insects love them over cannabis plants 9 times out of 10. So they're a great bait plant to help keep your insects off your other plants. They're a quick turnover. You can put them in for 2 months and pull them out, or buy a huge pack of them and just for real cheap, and they make great bait plants. The sugar snap peas are really nice to have year round. And you can squeeze them in on the edge of your grow beds and stuff, and they don't really seem to affect nutrient levels a whole heck of a lot as far as pulling any kind of rate close to what the cannabis plants pull. So they're not too bad. I know I think you use them as well, Marty, right, when you're getting late in flower?
Yeah, I do. I use them as microgreens, though, as opposed to letting them grow out and actually grow the beans. I just use them as microgreens, and they'll actually regenerate about six or 7 times. So you let them grow up and you cut them, and they'll grow back, and they'll actually continue growing. But once you cut them about 6 or 7 times, each time they grow a little bit slower and a little bit thinner and a little bit smaller. And so usually about that time, I just pull them out and throw them in the outside worm bin, and then replant new seeds. And I've even gotten to the point now where I kind of have like little patches. So I'll do, one patch I'll have seeded out here, so that way I can kind of keep them, always have some on hand to have for dinner. And we actually grow now in just in the 4 half-barrel beds that I use microgreens for the cannabis. We grow way more than we eat most of the time. So just off of those microgreens that grow off of supplemental lighting, we usually end up taking them and putting them in a food processor, and then mixing them with butter and freezing them into cubes, so that we can take them out and throw them in a stir fry or something like that, use them in cooking. So we usually have to find a way to use our excess greens so that they don't just go to waste or overgrow the plants. I've had the peas start climbing the cannabis on multiple occasions because we didn't eat them fast enough.
Yeah, I've used multiple times used peppers, or used the big old cannabis plants in the greenhouse as pepper trellises. It's really funny to wrap the branches around it and have the peppers hanging off the lower branches of the pot plants. And it's also nice because the peppers seem to attract anything else that would climb up the plant before it gets to the buds and stuff. The spider mites and aphids and everything seem to go after the peppers beforehand too. That's another good companion plant. But
that's one thing I didn't have to deal with on this grow at all. I didn't have any spider mites at all. I feel like I've gotten pretty good routine on that in terms of the different oil sprays that we've talked about before, using those all the way through veg. and then after veg releasing ladybugs and predator mites, about a week or so into flower, for me has been pretty successful in keeping them out the entire time. I haven't had any on this run. I had some on the last run. I've actually had some in the first 2 runs that I ended up taking care of with both of those we talked about before, the oil spray and the predator mites, ladybugs, been the combination that I work the best. And those are probably, I would say PM and mites of some sort are probably the 2 things that you're just about sure to deal with if you grow plants indoors. Or I guess if you grow cannabis indoors, especially anywhere that has, you know, a moderate climate, I would say, not extremely arid, might be able to get away with it. But anywhere where the humidity outside raises and lowers drastically, and you get those changes in temperatures. So anywhere you have a moderate climate, you're going to run into PM, and probably mites. Both are the 2 things that you want to be prepared for. So if you're a beginner, get started, and you're looking for stuff to be prepared for it, those would be 2 things that I would recommend you be prepared to deal with. And it's really the same whether you're growing in aquaponics or anything else. I guess the difference being that you have to be a little bit more careful. Well, obviously you can't just spray anything onto your plants when you're doing aquaponics, but really you shouldn't do that anyway. So I guess it's not really overly different, but maybe it's not as tempting to spray poison when you know you have fish down there that will die if you do it. So what else you got over there, Steve?
I was going to touch on the news. There's a little bit of news. The Canada announced on 420 that they're going to legalize by the spring of 2017, which is good news for me.
Yeah.
On our import. Yeah. So, and I found out a little bit more about how the export stuff is going to work down here and things that I can't talk about, but yeah, it'll work out soon. And then the cannabis genome got mapped. There's a really cool website I wanted to plug. It's shoot, hold on, what's the name of this thing? I thought I had the actual link saved on our file here, and apparently I got it wrong. It's called shoot. It's called the Phylos Galaxy, and it's basically a 3D genetic map of basic cannabis strains and where one came from the next. And this was based off of samples they got from all over the world. They tested the DNA of them and then they cross-referenced them, and it's pretty interesting to see how you can kind of trace most of the lineages, and then there's a few that are just kind of oddballs they haven't quite figured out genetically. They're just kind of sit out on their own, but it's pretty neat. But basically, one of the biggest things for this is that by mapping all this out and saying these all existed well before anyone had a patent on them, this is another way to help protect against patent trolls and big pharma trying to patent stuff and this, that, and the other. Because if you can trace the DNA for all this and all all the rest, it helps you for lawsuits in regards to all that stuff. So if that ever happened, which they're going to try and pull, let's not kid ourselves. The UN drug meeting made a lot of progress. They haven't announced, I guess, what the findings are out of that yet, but that big meeting they had last week was really nice. And it's about time we made progress. There's over 1,000 people spoke at the UN not spoke, but were there to represent their countries about how ridiculous the current drug laws are globally. And then for Ken I use, we had 2 products this week. We had someone ask about iron, and next week we'll get into iron different types of iron. We just don't have quite as much time as we always do this week. And then, so this product's called somebody asked about Dr. Iron, which is commonly found in a lot of box stores in the US. It's listed as OMRI listed. And it is iron sulfate. And iron sulfate you can use in aquaponics. Just be mindful that it will also turn your water red. quite a bit.
It'll turn it red.
Yes, yeah, but you can use it. It's not the one I would recommend. I would recommend using DTPA, but if you don't have any other options, you can use it in a pinch. It's not going to kill anything. The other one that we got a question about was Bonide. I'll give you the exact product name here in a second. It loads. So this was Green Rich Bonide liquid iron plus micronutrients. And this one was kind of nice because it had some magnesium, a little bit of copper, a little bit of iron, but it has 0.5% zinc in it, which is really, really, really high. If you're adding it to the a system, so you could use this, but I don't know if you would want to use it indefinitely. But, you could definitely use it, here and there, especially because it does add manganese and copper and boron and magnesium. But it is one that you would want to be mindful of. But that was also fish safe. But again, I wouldn't use it more than one bottle's worth. You're risking pushing your zinc too high, especially in a closed loop system where you're not dumping it. Just be mindful that this product, if you overuse it, the zinc sulfate is going to be an issue. But the iron, again, is iron sulfate, just like the last product.
You normally recommend like chelated iron, right?
Yeah, so normally I would recommend DTPA because it's available in the ranges that aquaponics is in, and it also doesn't break down anywhere near as quick, and it doesn't screw with your testing equipment. If you use EDDHA, which is a really common one, it's also one that's recommended in some videos out there about aquaponics. That's fine if you're doing hydro and you're not doing titration tests for individual nutrients, or you're not sending it out for commercial analysis. But if you are, it's going to screw up. You can't use HANA testers. You can't use most titration tests for nitrates. It'll give you all kinds of weird readings for iron if you try to use a lot of iron test kits for it, because of the way that it affects light going through it. So it screws everything up, and it's also doesn't last as long in the water as the DTPA. Unless you're in direct sunlight, then they're about equal. But if you have your tanks covered, the way they should be, at least as far as sunlight goes, it just has a UV breakdown, and you're not using a UV sterilizer, you're way better off going with DTPA, which is the one that you should be using, ideally anyway. And that's all I had for that part. If you guys have any questions about that, definitely let me know. We have another giveaway this week, thanks to Atria Hydroponics in Oklahoma. Let me look up the thing from last week, and we'll pick a winner here. But we'll have another nutrient line gift from Atria Aquaponics this week. Let me go back. Did you have anything else, Marty, while I'm looking this up here?
Not that I can think of. I think we talked about all the stuff I have going on. I'll probably have some more stuff to share once I sort of get my rebuild done here.
Alrighty. Why don't we give last week's one to Jack Herrera? He participated quite a bunch and had a bunch of great questions and we had a really good time. So this week we'll give it to Jack Herrera on the comment section. He'll be, blocked from getting any for a little while, and we'll give somebody else a chance to win next week. But if you guys want to get a free nutrient gift from Atria Aquaponics, we'll leave a comment in the video and like it, and feel free to share it, and make sure you subscribe to both my channel and Marty's, and we'll pick a winner next week. And thanks very much for them. Thanks again to Dude Grows Show for hosting us as well over at dudegrows.com. Really appreciate it. Make sure to check out their website, Real Growers, where you can, they have some supplies. A lot of them are aquaponic safe, especially the recharge over there. And a shout out to Kita Life for helping us out a little bit on one of our other projects. Just wanted to give them a big thank you. Sorry about the noise in the background. And yeah, make sure you check out the channel. Also check out my website if you guys are need help at all with your aquaponics stuff, cannabis grows. Check me out at potentponics.com. You can reach me there. I won't mention what I do on there, but if you feel you want to check it out, I have different services if you need anything. I don't know. Make sure you subscribe to both our channels. We're on Twitter and Facebook. Facebook group is Aquaponic Cannabis. Somebody reported the podcast post yesterday as spam, so I can't post until Friday. So if I don't reply to you guys, that's why. But on Facebook anyway. But that'll get fixed here on Friday. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and my channel is Potent Ponics on YouTube. Marty, I'll let you mention yours.
Yeah, so I'm AP Meds on YouTube. Just subscribe to the channel. You can also find Steve's and my recommended channels there on the side, and I think vice versa on Steve's channel you can find mine. There's a couple other guys on there too. I know we keep trying to get them onto the podcast. I don't know what the ETA is going to be on that. I bug them every once in a while, but
yeah, I've been trying every week to get some other aquaponic growers on here, and we both talk to a bunch, but trying to schedule where we can either get a recording or do a live show. We might end up doing just a live random evening thing or something just to try and make it work. But and then we're also looking to get in some more guests, some people that are working on nutrients, working on microbes, working on other things that are aquaponic safe, and trying to get some of their knowledge on the show as well. I've been working on trying to get that happening. I should have some more information on that soon.
A big shout out to Matthew in the group, who's dealing with some discrimination right now.
Oh yeah, we got a couple of minutes. Do you want to talk about that? Because that was some bullshit.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth it. I didn't think about it until we mentioned the Facebook group, but yeah, I think it's worth talking about. I mean,
yeah, we'll just mention his first name because I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how comfortable he is either. Matthew,
yeah,
common name. So.
Well, yeah. So this gentleman named Matt, he's having an issue.
How about you could put the bank name out there so that we can make sure. Basically, he runs a small garden supply.
Oh yeah. We'll definitely put this bank's name up because we want people to write them or call them or send them an email. Definitely let this bank know what they're doing is not right. Let me pull this up here and I'll say, okay. So this guy, he opened he's got his own little gardening business. Okay, it's not even cannabis related. And it's just a little garden center, like a really small garden center, like corner of a block kind of thing. And but some of the people there are growers, and he's in a state where it's perfectly legal. And anyways, so this bank is shutting him down, saying that he's involved in the cannabis industry and risking their banking thing, even though he doesn't own a dispensary. He isn't involved in transportation of cannabis. He isn't involved in extraction of cannabis. If you're not handling any of those, the feds can't come after you on it. So they have no legal right to issue this kind of shutdown. But they're hurting this guy's business. They're hurting his ability to pay his bills, hurting his ability to feed his family, all this other crap with zero basis. And they're trying to say that an anonymous cop had an undercover camera on them that showed them a video to the bank. Now, he went to the local police department and was like, okay, this is the letter I got from my bank. This is the information I got from my bank. I need, what's going on? Did you or did you not have an informant in the store? I have 6 cameras that can prove that nothing, because he has 6 cameras inside the store, and he had all with microphones. Or maybe, I don't know about the microphone part, but he's got 6 cameras in the store. Anyways, so the cops said they had no idea what he was talking about. They have never even had a report about his store on record with them, and that there was no issue, and that they absolutely did not send someone in with a camera, nor that they had any issue. That was the bank's. That's what the bank said. So now he's in this he said she said with the bank that's turned into this big long thing, and they're telling him he has to pull all of his funds by, I think it's May 1st, or they're gonna send it to him in the mail. But totally screwing up this poor guy's business's ability to buy new stock, keep things in stock. Yeah, he talked to both the local chamber of commerce is the one that said an anonymous police official had a camera pointed at him talking to customers about cannabis. And when he talked to the police department about it, the police said they had no clue what he was talking about.
Yeah, and who knows, like, who'd actually believe in that situation, whether they would tell him if they actually did or any of that stuff. But they're
just trying to intimidate him out, and it's illegal. You can't file false accusations and then affect someone's ability to do business. You can sue for damages against that, even a bank in this situation.
Right, and as a small business owner, even though obviously my business is completely different, but any small business owner will tell you what a burden that is to have to set up all those new accounts again, even if just switching to another bank just because you were unhappy or whatever reason. It impacts all those relationships you have with all your suppliers. It changes all the information you work with your accountant. It's going to be more work because they're going to have separate accounts to be able to track.
I got 1 second. I get at the door. Sorry, I don't mean to be.
Go ahead.
I just have to get the door. Sorry.
So it's a huge burden for a small business owner to have to go through that. And so, yeah, I really feel for the guy. It's clear discrimination. They basically told him that they're just choosing to not do business with him because they think he might sell stuff to cannabis growers. And it's not like actual, like he was saying, it's not like actual product. It's not like he's selling clones. Oh, they complained about stuff being, cannabis being grown in the window. And it's not even cannabis. It was like vegetables. So because he has vegetables growing in his window and somebody mistakes it for cannabis and they complain about, he posted pictures of it and it's seriously like, I don't remember what it is, but it's like leeks and green onions and like kale and crap. Like I just can't, like the amount of discrimination to me is always shocking. It's like the letter that I got in the mail here, like I can't believe that somebody went to that much trouble just to tell me that they're going to file a complaint against me. It is just beyond me. And then people like this that are clearly carrying out discriminatory acts against the business that's not even, that just might be related to cannabis. It's ridiculous. You're on mute, Steve.
If you're gonna pick on this, you gotta shut down Taco Bell and Pizza Hut because they're equally as connected in that regard, as far as distance from growers. Like, this is stupid. You know what I mean? This is absolutely ludicrous.
Right, and the fact that people believe so strongly against it is still beyond me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. just the guilty by association can still carry that much weight for somebody. To me, just seems ridiculous.
Yeah, so he's having he's got 4 cameras set up, and they cover the whole of his showroom. And he's got 2 more in the back. So he's got 6 total, and they cover everything, and he's still having to, fight it out with the bank. So
did you see where they said that he was growing cannabis in the window and he posted the pictures of it?
I missed that part.
It's hilarious. You should look at it. It's like not even close. I don't know how anybody.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how anybody.
So to describe this for people listening, it's like a bamboo raised planter bed with a horizontal hydro trays above it, and a grow light and fish in it. And there's leeks in a floating raft, and a bunch of seeds starting, and then there's looks like small kale. And in no way is there anything that even has the same number of points on a leaf as any cannabis plant. Better yet, anything that isn't remotely the same plant structure. Even like a pepper there, where you could say, oh, at least the structure is similar. It's just asinine. So, but this is the kind of crap you're going to have to put up with post-legalization. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And this is why we need to get a freaking banking regulation law on the federal end. We've been fighting for this for years, and we still haven't gotten it yet, and it's still the biggest hurdle in the cannabis industry. the federal banking regulations. So hopefully when it gets rescheduled, that should finally end.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, rescheduling definitely seems like the next logical step and would cut out a lot of this bullshit to start with, because pretty much they bank on every ruling not being able to go anywhere in a federal court because of it. It makes lawsuits for any of this stuff extremely difficult. And that's part of the reason why I mentioned the right to grow lawsuit, is because their particular lawsuit, you can't have anything to do with cannabis if you want it to get any sort of actual traction. So they're not really suing them for something directly cannabis related. What they're suing them for is their contrary interpretation of a state law. So you interpret a state law different than what it's intended to be for, is technically against the law here in Oregon. So that's why it has to be drafted so particular. And if you didn't have that issue, if any of these direct cannabis issues could be heard in a federal court of law, so if it was rescheduled, then when these cases got to the federal level, they wouldn't have that to throw it out. Because right now, anything that you have directly related to the cannabis industry, as soon as a lawyer hears that it has something to do with it, they're automatically going to go, well, you're not going to be able to win, because they'll just take you all the way to federal court, and then it's not happening. So it literally shuts down every avenue that you have legally to pursue action when it's directly related to cannabis.
Oh, I remember. What was the name of that? I want to publicly shame this bank because what they're doing is wrong. What is the name of this? Hold on. I need to find the letter.
I know he posted. I'll find it.
Yeah, he underlined it. And this guy's going through hell. It's not right, and I want to support him. And if you guys are going through something else like this, let us know. We're happy to help you too.
We'll publicly shame people all day long.
We'll publicly shame any bank you want. I have no problem with that. And you know what? If you guys look at history, who's the only person that ever got violent with the banks? Or Jesus was the only person he ever got violent with was the bankers. You know what I mean?
Right,
so even if you're a biblical person.
Katadian Trust Bank?
Yeah, Katadian. Yeah, Kathadin Trust Company. And their website is KATAHDINTRUST.com. Their phone number is 207-495-4200. So if you think this is wrong, why don't you give them a phone call or go on their website and let them know what you think, because that's why they give you information like this.
And they're in Maine, looks like.
Yeah, and they're out of Maine. So, if you feel bad for him, you want to support him, call the bank and let them know what you think of their policy. And, if you're a lawyer and you're able to help this guy out, get a hold of us, and we'll and you're in Maine and you're interested in helping, get a hold of me and I'll pass you info back over to him. If you need to reach out to us, you can always write me at potentponics@gmail.com. And Marty, whoever you want to.
Yeah, you can just most people just message me on Facebook. My name is Marty Waddell, and you can just message me on there, or just leave a comment on the YouTube channel. You can actually message people through YouTube also, but it's kind of a pain in the ass. So
yeah.
So yeah, you can just leave a comment there, and I can get a hold of you there if you just want me to send you a message. Or like I said, the Aquaponic Cannabis Growers is our Facebook group. You can look us up, post in there, or be able to private message us also. Is probably one of the easiest ways to get a hold of us. We're in the Aquaponics Facebook group also, and we get to argue with people about cannabis on there as well. That's super fun. We had somebody there, but I can't remember what the original debate was. Or I posted
one of good ones.
One of my updates, and he was like, 0 value, period. And that was like all he said. I just think somebody else started picking a fight with him. Honestly, I don't,
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I let people believe whatever they want. Like if it's zero value to him, that's fine. But pretty much, you know, there's a large volume of people that assign value to it, like school systems and tax revenue, and probably most of his neighbors. So he was upset that apparently everybody who he tells he does aquaponics thinks that he grows weed. Like his big issue with it, which I thought was kind of funny. Maybe all his friends smoke weed. They were hoping, they're like, oh really? You should hook me up.
Alrighty, well, that's it for us this week. If you guys want to reach me, feel free to hit me up. We've mentioned a bunch. Make sure you subscribe, and that'll be it for this week. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.